Hey guys, today I'll show you a sci-fi thriller TV series named Brea, Season 1. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The drama takes place in a park in Los Angeles where it's bubbling like boiling water. Suddenly, a smelly dog is barking incessantly, indicating that something is off. Just then, cracks start appearing on the road, and a massive sinkhole emerges out of nowhere, expanding rapidly and swallowing everything around it. At that moment, Eve was dropping her son off at school, so she didn't even have time to turn around and had to back up quickly. But they were soon blocked, and had no choice but to abandon their car and run with the crowd. Because of a moment's delay to help someone, her son, Josh, unfortunately falls into the sinkhole. Eve is devastated to see that, but soon she too is swallowed by the sinkhole. Fortunately, her daughter manages to grab hold of her in time, but the sinkhole is still expanding and she is too heavy to be pulled up. In order not to hold her daughter back, Eve forcefully wrests her arm free and falls into the sinkhole. Eve's husband, Gavin, gets a call from their daughter and rushes to the scene. By this time, the rescue team has arrived, but facing such a massive sinkhole, everyone is at a loss. Even more eerie is the fact that huge fat birds are flying out of the sinkhole, scaring everyone into shitting their pants and retreating, not wanting to check what could be at the bottom of this black hole, and how animals could survive underground. Gavin is so shocked he can't speak because he has seen these strange birds before. He used to be an excellent pilot, but was forced to retire after a plane crash in the desert 3 years ago. Since then, he's been having hallucinations of vast plains, massive stones, and strange birds. The scene changes to Eve, whose heavy body fell into the sinkhole. She slowly wakes up from unconsciousness. She feels as if she fell into a ball of light, and her previous experience seems dreamlike. Eve suddenly jolts awake to find herself on a vast plain. The beam of light in the sky is exactly the same as in her dream, but Eve has no time to think about all this now. She needs to find her son Josh as soon as possible. She hasn't even noticed that her wedding ring is missing, lying next to a large stone with a blood-red claw mark. Eve runs with all her strength and notices smoke rising in the distance. When she gets there, she's shocked by the scene in front of her. There are many survivors gathered, with vehicles and buildings that fell into the sinkhole scattered around. Fortunately, her son Josh is also here, and mother and son are finally reunited. The survivors start introducing themselves, all wanting to know what just happened. To their confusion, while the vehicles and buildings were severely damaged, they all landed unscathed from the sinkhole. They speculate about the green light they passed through. Sam, a veteran from the Navy, interrupts their discussions. He says that in a situation where it's unknown when they can return, gathering survival supplies is the most important thing. So everyone disperses. When Eve and her son reached the edge of the forest, something terrifying happened. A wolf, unlike any they had ever seen, appeared. Its fur was ink black and its teeth were sharp. Despite being alone, it charged at the humans without hesitation. The mother and son turned to run, only to encounter another wolf. The survivors scattered in fear. Soon, some were knocked down and dragged into the woods. The remaining wolf was catching up to Eve and her son. Josh was unfortunately bitten. Eve could not run anymore. She picked up a stone, ready to fight back. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out, killing the wolf. It was the psychiatrist, Ty, who had come to their aid. Eve shouted for help because Josh was severely injured. Everyone quickly came over to help, carrying the injured to an abandoned bus. Above the ground, the authorities sent a doctor named Sophia to be in charge of this sinkhole incident. She was calming the public in front of the cameras, but they still had no idea how deep the sinkhole was. There was no plan to send a rescue team. Instead, they planned to send a military drone to check the situation. Hearing this, Gavin and his daughter felt disheartened. All they could do was pray for the safe return of Eve and Josh. At this moment, Gavin started having hallucinations again. This time it was different. He vaguely saw Eve and Josh on a plane. Remembering the strange birds he saw earlier, Gavin speculated that the hallucinations he saw might be real. He was eager to find Sophia, the rescue commander, to talk. Sophia, through a drone, also discovered the green light in the sinkhole, but the drone lost signal the moment it got close. This reminded her of a similar green light that appeared in the desert 3 years ago. She prepared to report this and coincidentally met Gavin, who had been waiting for a long time at the entrance. He told Sophia that there were still people alive at the bottom of the sinkhole and that a rescue team needed to be dispatched as soon as possible. To make his story more credible, Gavin also told her about the drone crash he had seen in his vision. But Sophia was only slightly surprised and didn't take Gavin's words to heart. Gavin ran home, turning up all his previous photos. He felt that the massive stone in his visions looked familiar. His daughter and sister thought he had gone mad, but Gavin didn't care. Finally, in a photo with his wife, he found this strange stone. He planned to go to the place where the stone was located to investigate. On the other side, the situation for Eve and the others trapped in the sinkhole is far from good. Josh was bitten by a giant wolf that no one had ever heard of. Given the lack of medical supplies, it's doubtful he can hold on. Sam had joined the military and had some medical knowledge, so he tells Eve that they need to find antibiotics and tools to stitch up the wound. Eve suddenly recalls that an ambulance passed by just before the sinkhole appeared, and it might have also fallen into the pit, so she decides to search around. Concerned about her safety, Sam decides to accompany her. On their journey, they run into Ty, who has lost all hope and is contemplating ending his life. Eve rushes to dissuade him and barely manages to talk him out of his suicidal thoughts. Coincidentally, Ty mentions that he saw an ambulance earlier, so he promptly leads Eve and Sam to find it. But the journey is long, and it's getting dark. By the time the three of them reach the ambulance, night has fallen. The ambulance is fully stocked with medicines, but Eve feels a strange familiarity with the distant mountain scenery, thinking that it is the Rocky Mountain on the outskirts of Los Angeles. Just then, a tiger suddenly appears from the nearby jungle, flexing its strange figure. Meanwhile, Gavin has arrived at the location of the massive stone in their photo. He decides to dig around, hoping to find some useful clues. Astonishingly, he finds the ring Eve always wore in the depth of the pit. He doesn't know how to interpret this, but he is certain that Eve and their son must still be alive. At the same time, the rescue commander Sophia has found a giant bird that flew out of the sinkhole. Its name, according to records, is the Thunderbird, an extinct creature from ancient times. From Eve's discovery of the Rocky Mountain in the sinkhole world, the prehistoric beast like the wolves and saber-toothed tigers, and her husband finding her ring next to the strange stone, it seems that the people who fell into the sinkhole have traveled through a green light time rift to a prehistoric period. Although the couple is in the same location, their timelines are millions of years apart. The saber-toothed tiger is a creature that went extinct tens of thousands of years ago. Its gaping maw and elongated fangs mark it as one of the most ferocious beasts ever known. Upon spotting humans, it didn't hesitate to pounce. However, as formidable as it is, it couldn't withstand the damage inflicted by bullets. Thanks to this reprieve, the three humans managed to take refuge beneath a precipice, temporarily escaping the tiger's pursuit. Eve gazes at the green light in the sky, but can't make sense of why they would encounter such a prehistoric beast in this place. Eve had no choice but to venture into the dangerous plains in search of medicine for her injured son. Although they've temporarily shaken off their pursuer, no one knows if the tiger is lurking nearby, ready to strike. She and her two companions, Sam and Ty, climb out from beneath the precipice and walk towards their camp under the cover of darkness. As expected, the tiger hadn't strayed far. Sam was caught off guard and knocked off the precipice by the beast. Ty and Eve tried to flee, but their path was quickly blocked. The tiger pounced like a starving predator. The surviving duo didn't have time to wonder who set this trap and hastily left the scene. They went to the edge of the cliff to search for Sam, who was carrying a backpack full of medicines. By the next morning, they found Sam lying motionless at the bottom of the cliff. His spine had sustained severe damage, making it impossible for him to walk on his own. Eve and Ty had to support him as they struggled onwards. Sam, however, thought this was too slow and might delay the treatment of Eve's son. He decided to let Eve go ahead while Ty stayed behind to look after him. Anxious to save her son, Eve didn't refuse. She grabbed the backpack and quickly ran towards the camp. Just as Josh fell into a coma, Eve finally arrived. She administered an antibiotic injection and breathed a sigh of relief. At this time, Riley, who had been taking care of Josh, was very angry to hear about her father's injury. She was upset that Eve had left her father Sam behind. She ran out, debating whether or not to venture into the wilderness to find her father. Just then, her friend Scott came over to tell her about a shocking secret. Not long ago, a man was suddenly attacked by an ancient wolf. He lost his ability to resist almost instantly and was carried away by the wolf. His daughter, Veronica, couldn't bear to watch him die and decided to venture deep into the wilderness to find her father. Scott immediately offered to accompany her. Fortunately, they were quite lucky this time and didn't encounter any more wild beasts along the way. Shortly afterward, Scott spotted a herd of camels sprinting across the plains, seemingly about to rush into the pitch lake ahead. Scott ran over to stop them, saving the lives of these 8 camels. This scene triggered a thought in Scott, but he was quickly interrupted by Veronica, who had discovered her father's body not far away. To their confusion, the body was placed in the center of a pile of bizarre stones, like some kind of sacrifice. Veronica had to bury her father as soon as possible and left this place. Afterward, the two safely returned to their camp. Scott remembered the pitch lake. He told Riley that, at this same time last year, 8 ancient camel skeletons were discovered in the La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles. Experts, through carbon dating of the camel skulls, deduced that they originated from around 10,000 BC. Scott had just saved 8 camels who were about to rush into a pitch lake. The skeletons discovered from the La Brea tar pits could very well belong to them. If their deduction was correct, then their current location would be the suburbs of Los Angeles from 10,000 BC. Although surprised, Riley didn't have time to dwell on it. She was preparing to go to the plains to search for her injured father. Just then, she spotted her father, with the aid of Ty and a stranger returning to the camp. Overjoyed, Riley burst into tears, and this also eased Eve's mind. It turned out that after Eve left, Ty was struggling to help Sam on his own. He was increasingly exhausted and was constantly coughing. Sam quickly realized that Ty must be sick, but Ty denied it. As nightfall approached, Sam no longer questioned him and suggested that Ty leave him and return to the camp alone. Just then, they heard a rustling from the nearby jungle. A stern-faced man suddenly appeared. Luckily, he was not a threat, and with his help, they were able to bring Sam back to the camp safely. The man introduced himself as Lucas. He claimed to have woken up in the wilderness after falling into a sinkhole. As everyone left, Officer Mary found Lucas alone. It turned out that she was Lucas's mother. However, judging by their conversation, there seemed to be some tension between the mother and son. As everyone was carrying Sam into the bus to receive treatment, Josh also woke up. He seemed to be out of danger, suggesting that everything was moving in a positive direction. Eve's husband, Gavin, had not given up on the rescue outside the sinkhole. He saw on TV that paleontologist Dr. Shen had confirmed the giant bird that flew out of the sinkhole belonged to ancient life forms. Similar species fossils had been found before in the La Brea tar pits. Holding his wife's wedding ring, Gavin speculated whether Eve might be in that era due to the sinkhole. He quickly found Dr. Shen and begged him to perform a carbon dating test on the ring to determine its age. If it also originated from ancient times, it would prove that his wife was in that era too. But before the results came out, Gavin was approached by Homeland Security and taken to a secret base. Confused, he saw Sophia take out the wedding ring, and he realized what was happening. Apparently, earlier in the day, Sophia reported to her superiors about the strange green light found in the sinkhole, wanting to arrange a team to explore it. However, the higher-ups believed there might be unknown dangers behind the green light and insisted on evidence about what lies within before proceeding. At this point, Sophia recalled Gavin's claim that he could see scenes within the green light, so she had his background investigated and implemented round-the-clock surveillance. Sophia quickly found a clue: the wedding ring of Gavin's wife. Dr. Shen had determined through carbon dating that the ring was from 10,000 BC, enough proof that Gavin's wife had been transported back to ancient times through the green light. What's more, Gavin found this ring through a vision, proving that he could indeed see the world behind the green light. Sophia then dropped another bombshell. On the day Gavin's plane crashed years ago, another sinkhole appeared not far from him in the desert, with green light found at the bottom. This reminded Gavin of a fleeting green light he saw before he passed out from the crash. When he woke up, he was in a hospital, occasionally seeing visions of wild plains and forests. The doctor explained it as post-concussion syndrome, but Gavin felt there was more to it. Sophia believed Gavin's account, thinking he was the only one who could see the world behind the green light, possibly due to some connection formed with the parallel world from the crash. Subsequently, she took Gavin to a vast warehouse where there was an oddly shaped plane. It turns out they had been secretly developing a vehicle that could enter the sinkhole ever since one appeared in the desert years ago. Now, with Gavin's appearance, it was an opportune time. Sophia planned to arrange for Gavin to lead a team into the green light to investigate. This could potentially become the greatest discovery in human history. On the other side, the group of survivors were lining up for food when suddenly a massive beast appeared. Upon seeing it, everyone scattered for their shitty life in fear. But the creature was as gentle as a man and didn't attack humans, but it devoured all their food. Once the beast left, everyone came out from hiding, saddened at the sight of the scattered food remnants. In this mysterious land, there were no signs of human life or modern buildings. They had put a lot of effort into gathering a small amount of food from the vehicles and buildings that had fallen into the sinkhole with them, and now it was all gone. Scott, a historian among them, recognized the beast as a megatherium, the largest mammal of the prehistoric era. He deduced that the green light they had passed through was a rift in space-time, and that they were now in approximately 10,000 BC. The others dismissed Scott's theory as nonsense, but Eve agreed with him. She had seen a saber-toothed tiger with her own eyes, and the surrounding mountains were identical to those in Los Angeles, which suggested they were still in LA, but had been transported back in time. However, Lucas refused to accept this explanation. He announced his plan to venture into the jungle to find someone who could provide answers and a way to leave. Eve didn't have time to deal with Lucas's rebellion. Although finding a way home was important, the immediate task was to find food. The only feasible method was hunting. Having grown up on a farm, Eve remembered some basic trapping techniques. In no time, Eve had set up a small trap, which caught a wild rabbit. But just then, Ty spotted a brown bear nearby. The two of them froze, unsure of what to do. Eve quickly came up with a plan, placing the rabbit on the ground. The bear was distracted, giving Eve and Ty a chance to run. However, the bear was not fooled for long and began to chase them. Just when they were about to be caught, Ty called out to Eve and led her into a nearby cave. The bear, too large to fit, could only claw at the rock wall. Unexpectedly, the falling rocks blocked the entrance. After the bear left, Ty tried to remove the rocks, but it was more difficult than he had anticipated. Eve suggested they go deeper into the cave to find an exit. As they ventured further in, they saw a light in the distance. Upon closer inspection, they found it was Lucas and his mother, Mary. Earlier, Lucas had left the camp to find someone who could provide answers, but after a long walk, he hadn't seen a single soul. Mary had followed him out of concern. However, Lucas was dismissive of his mother and ignored her question about why he was certain there were others in the area. Instead of answering, Lucas picked up a stick. He had discovered the trap the day before when it contained a tiger. But today, the tiger was gone, and the trap had been reset. Lucas was certain there were others around who knew the environment well. If they could find this person and ask the right questions, all their puzzles would be solved. They had discovered this cave. They'd gone to the very end of it earlier and found it to be a dead end, so they had returned, and that's how they met Eve and Ty. The group was now anxious because the only exit was now blocked by rocks. They were trapped inside. Mary suddenly remembered there was a side path. Without a second thought, the group rushed towards the side path. Upon reaching its end, they found it was also a dead end. Just as everyone felt at a loss, Ty noticed algae floating in a pond. He was certain there had to be a way out underwater because algae needs sunlight to survive. Eve opposed this idea because they didn't know what prehistoric beasts were lurking in the water. But Ty didn't care about the potential danger. He jumped into the pond without hesitation. 5 minutes passed, and the surface of the water remained still. Just as everyone was growing anxious, Ty finally surfaced. He shared that there was indeed an exit on the other side of the pond. The group quickly crossed the pond and reached the other end of the cave. There, they found a skeleton. Judging by the attire, the skeleton was also someone who had crossed over. There were time markings on the stone wall indicating that he had survived here for several years, but sadly, he had shot himself. Lucas was disappointed. This man must have been unable to find a way home, causing him to despair and choose to end his life. The others agreed with Lucas's inference and felt rather depressed. Back at the camp, the survivors were unaware of all this. Josh had fully recovered, but Sam, who had helped him find medicine, was still in bad shape. He had injured his spine, and upon waking up, found that he had lost all feeling in his legs. Sam told his daughter Riley that his condition was likely caused by fluid pressing on the spine, and it needed to be drained. Riley panicked when she heard this. If they delayed, it could cause her father to be permanently disabled. She had no choice but to prepare for the surgery. Before the operation, Riley asked Scott and Josh to help prepare some medical supplies. To her surprise, the young men had found several packages of hallucinogens in an abandoned car. This substance could numb nerves and alleviate pain, which was a valuable resource in their current environment. After injecting the anesthetic, Sam carefully explained the procedural steps. First, identify the injection location, then extract 6 milliliters of fluid. But unexpectedly, Sam fell asleep before he could finish his explanation. Riley was panicked. Luckily, Josh kept calming her using his words but not muscles. She inserted the syringe into the designated position and successfully drained the fluid from Sam's spine. Fortunately, the operation went smoothly. When Sam woke up, he regained feeling in his legs. The father and daughter embraced each other, nearly brought to tears by their relief. On the other side, Eve and the others finally emerged from the cave, reminding each other not to let anyone else know about this place. Otherwise, all the survivors would lose hope. But now, Lucas was already in despair. Even if they kept it a secret, they would starve sooner or later. But Eve didn't think so. She believed that if that man could survive in the cave for a few years, there must be food nearby. Sure enough, she soon found a large number of mushrooms on a tree and was certain that they were non-toxic. So everyone returned to the camp fully loaded, at least not having to worry about food for a few days. With this experience, Ty and Eve became close. He revealed that he was already suffering from cancer before being trapped here, so he could do anything without fearing death. Knowing he didn't have much time left, he gave his handgun to Eve. Eve stared at the gun for a long time without saying a word. She also started to worry about her family outside the cave. On her husband's side, Gavin was still preparing for the rescue mission. In this secret base, the search and rescue team was making the final adjustments to the aircraft. Its mission was challenging. It had to fly into a 10,000-meter pit to rescue the survivors. Sophia stated that the map of Los Angeles from 10,000 BC had been corrected, and now they just needed to finalize the flight crew. Gavin, originally a pilot, wanted to volunteer, but Sophia rejected him. He was retired and had no qualification to pilot a military aircraft. Gavin had no choice but to recommend a comrade named Levi. Sophia agreed after hearing this because Levi's name was already on the candidate list. Levi, not only a comrade of Gavin, was also familiar with his family. When Gavin became despondent after retiring due to a plane crash, Levi often came to help his family. Since he was assigned to other military areas for missions, he had not appeared again. After many years, the old partners met again. Levi first apologized to Gavin. He always thought that Gavin saw hallucinations because of some disease, but he didn't expect everything to be true, and it played a key role now. Gavin pointed out the location of Eve and other survivors on the ancient map. After a discussion, the team quickly confirmed the landing site for the aircraft. Before departure, Gavin's daughter came to see off Levi, revealing her admiration for him in her words. After the daughter left, Gavin finally asked the question that had been bothering him for many years. Why had Levi left? After some hesitation, Levi revealed that he was in love with Gavin's wife, Eve, so he chose to run away. Levi then boarded the aircraft alone amidst everyone's farewell. Gavin did not blame Levi because of the previous conversation. The urgent task now was to rescue his wife. Gavin gave Eve's wedding ring to Levi, hoping it would come in handy. In the blink of an eye, Levi piloted the aircraft to the edge of the giant pit and began to descend steadily. Everyone in the command center watched closely, relaying live footage. Soon enough, anomalies started occurring. The interference within the pit was intense, and Levi's aircraft began to lose control. The situation worsened until the last message they received was that the engine of the aircraft was on fire. Then all communication was cut off. It was clear that a tragedy had befallen Levi. Gavin was in pain, not just from losing a comrade, but also because all hope of rescuing his wife vanished. On the other side, this group of survivors all gazed up at the night sky in surprise, where a green light was spreading. Suddenly, an aircraft fell from the sky. People speculated that the aircraft that fell might have been there to rescue them. Looking at the smoke billowing from the crash site in the distance, they knew they had to go check it out. This might be their only chance of escape. Quickly, a team of 5 got ready and set out towards the crash site. Along the way, they found an open parachute in a forest. Soon after, they heard screaming and gunshots nearby. As everyone was on high alert, a man emerged from the jungle. It was Levi, the pilot of the crashed plane. Seeing him, Eve was so surprised she couldn't speak. Josh was also familiar with him and quickly introduced Levi to the group. Everyone was thrilled after hearing that he had indeed come to rescue the survivors. However, Levi explained that he had parachuted out of the plane when it lost control. Whether they could fly back was uncertain until they found the aircraft. The group continued in the direction of the smoke. Eve noticed that something was off about Levi. After questioning him, she learned that Levi had injured his arm when he landed. Fortunately, it wasn't severe. Riley promptly bandaged his wound. Coincidentally, Gavin outside the pit was able to see everything that had just happened through a vision. He was on his way to the rescue headquarters to find Sophia and intended to tell her that Levi was still alive. Just then, his house suddenly shook violently. It was clear that an earthquake had occurred. He received a text message from the Weather Bureau reminding him that the epicenter was near the pit. Gavin guessed this might be related to Levi's plane crash. He drove off to find Sophia for clarity, but when he arrived at her office, she wasn't there. There was a file about him on the desk, and he couldn't help but peek inside. Just then, Sophia's partner suddenly appeared. Gavin quickly put away the file and told him that Levi was still alive. He suggested that the rescue team modify the aircraft and continue to dive into the pit. Sophia's partner didn't doubt Gavin's words, but he said it was impossible to send another plane down. The experts had confirmed that the earthquake was caused by the plane crash. They didn't dare risk sending another plane down, not knowing if it would lead to even more severe consequences. With that, Gavin had no choice but to leave first, taking the file from the desk with him. When he got home, he began to examine the file. Inside was a photo of Sophia with a strange woman. The date was exactly when his plane crashed years ago, and the desert sinkhole appeared. It was specially marked with fourth known event, implying there were more sinkholes in the world. This meant there were more possible entrances to find his wife. Now that Sophia couldn't be reached, he could only try to find the other woman in the photo. Fortunately, her name, Rebecca, was written on the photo. Gavin's daughter tried to search for her online and actually found her address. It seemed that she was not an unknown person, so Gavin decided to visit her. In the sinkhole, Eve and the group were still on their way to the crash site, but they were stopped by a river just before they arrived. Eve used a stick to test the depth and felt it was passable. Therefore, she took the lead and waded into the water, preparing to cross. However, they were unaware of the terrifying presence in the water. Riley was halfway across when she suddenly felt something touch her leg. On a closer look, it was a giant python. She was instantly dragged into the water. Levi immediately dove in but didn't catch up. Suddenly, ripples appeared on the water's surface as the python, coiled around Riley, surfaced. Levi dove in again. After a few muffled sounds came from the water, Riley was rescued, and the python was shot dead by Levi. After this incident, the group successfully found the crashed plane. Levi immediately crawled in. Thankfully, the plane still had power. However, the dashboard indicated that the right compressor was damaged and almost impossible to repair. In other words, this plane was now just a shell. Everyone took out all the useful supplies from inside, preparing to take them back to the camp. Just then, the plane's radar detected a signal source several miles away. Levi couldn't determine what it was, but there might be people there. So Eve decided to set up camp for the night and check it out first thing tomorrow. The survivors in the camp were also busy. Some were trying to repair the scrapped vehicles, and others went hunting in the nearby jungle. They had a good catch this time, catching several rabbits. As a guy went to get his tools, he suddenly turned around as if something terrifying was approaching. Veronica and her little sister, Lily, didn't notice anything and continued to bicker. For some reason, Veronica had been insisting that Lily act mute in front of others, but Lily wanted to communicate normally with others. As a result, their argument grew fiercer until Lily ran into the woods in anger. Suddenly, she noticed something approaching. In her panic, she tripped and fell. When she looked closely, it was the guy who was alive just a while ago. However, he had turned into a corpse covered in strange lines. Along with Lily's scream, many survivors arrived at the scene. Officer Mary asked Lily if she had seen anything. However, the little girl, remembering her sister's instructions, did not say a word in front of everyone. Seeing this, Veronica quickly took her sister away from there. However, the issue was not resolved, and everyone was inevitably a little scared. This guy's death was mysterious, and they feared that they might end up like him. Sam, although still recovering from a severe illness, asked everyone to leave first. He would perform an autopsy and confirm the cause of death. The guy's death was very strange, his body covered in red lines with only a few areas having slight scorch marks. Sam recognized these lines as Lichtenberg figures, a typical characteristic of being struck by lightning. But there had never been natural lightning here, and there was no possibility of artificial electricity in ancient times. So how exactly was the deceased electrocuted? Everyone at the scene fell silent. Mary suggested that they needed to find the first witness, Lily, for clarity. Ty decided to wait until Lily was emotionally stable the next day before asking. Soon, night fell. These survivors did not dare to act alone. They all gathered together for warmth. At this moment, Eve and Levi, once secret lovers, finally have the chance to be alone. As soon as Eve starts to talk, she scolds Levi for leaving for 2 years without so much as a phone call. Levi, in his defense, explains that he left the city out of guilt towards her husband, Gavin. Even now, Eve still has lingering feelings for Levi. She reveals that Gavin's delusions had long ago fractured their marriage, and they had started living separately 2 years ago. Upon hearing this, Levi takes out the wedding ring that Gavin had entrusted him with to pass on to Eve. He tells her that Gavin's visions were not delusions, but actual events. The ring that Eve had lost here was found by him based on those visions. Eve is stunned by that. She feels guilty for misjudging Gavin. To add insult to injury, Levi reveals that Gavin had already known about their smelly affair, which utterly devastates Eve. Soon they arrive at the location of the signal transmission. Surprisingly, it is a village protected by a wall, like a simple fortress. Scott is surprised by this. He believes that although there were indigenous people 10,000 years ago, they could not have constructed such housing structures. Driven by curiosity, they decide to explore. On the main gate of the village, there is a striking symbol of a blood-red handprint. Meanwhile, Ty is asking Lily about the murder of the guy the day before. To his surprise, Lily had actually seen the killer, a human male. When Ty asks her to describe the killer, the little girl falls back into fear. Her older sister tries to take her away, but before they get far, Lily breaks free and mentions that the killer was an old man. Officer Mary can't help but ask for more details about the killer. The only thing Lily says is handprint. Outside the sinkhole, Gavin and his daughter finally arrive at Rebecca's house, a secluded ranch. Unexpectedly, Sophia, who they had been unable to contact, is also there. After Gavin explains his intention to search for his wife through other sinkholes, Sophia informs him that all other sinkholes, except for the one in Los Angeles, have already closed. This news forces Gavin into despair. However, Rebecca claims to have a solution. She leads Gavin to a secret hangar where there is a spacecraft. It has been modified so it won't have the same type of accident Levi had. Gavin is curious about Rebecca's background. She, like Sophia, had been in charge of exploring the desert sinkhole. She had once sent a team into the sinkhole, but it closed before they could return. As a result, she was blamed for the incident and lost her position as a commander. But she hasn't given up and is still looking for opportunities to explore the sinkhole. Now that the aircraft is ready, all she needs is a pilot, and Gavin, a pilot himself, has shown up at her doorstep. At the ancient village, the group quietly enters the village out of curiosity, only to find it is strangely deserted. Levi suggests that they split up to look for clues, as the source of the signal he detected on the radar is here. The group of 6 splits into 3 teams. Josh and Riley find fresh food in a house, suggesting that the village isn't uninhabited. Josh later discovers an underground passage, and despite Riley's advice, goes down alone. The passage leads to a door that opens to the outside of the village. However, for some unknown reason, the door automatically closes, forcing them to re-enter the village through the main gate. Eve and Levi also noticed something unusual at this time. A slightly larger house stood out, marked by a red handprint symbol. Eve had seen this before on the rocks in the wilderness. Immediately, she and Levi moved towards the building. But as soon as they entered, Eve was startled. There was a corpse lying inside, surrounded by stones arranged into a handprint pattern. It resembled some kind of ritual. Levi didn't pay attention to these things. Instead, he took out a photograph and carefully compared it to the corpse's features. Eve was shocked. Only then did Levi reveal the truth. Besides rescuing Eve and the others, he also had to find the 7 people in the photo. They were the investigation team that flew into the desert sinkhole 3 years ago. Levi confirmed that this corpse was one of the 7. He then found a solar-powered walkie-talkie on the ground. It must be the source of the signal detected by the radar. Suddenly, Eve noticed that there was still warmth in the pile of firewood nearby. She concluded that there must still be people living in the village, and for safety reasons, they needed to leave immediately. Eve quickly went outside, but couldn't find the others. So, she sprinted towards the lookout post, from where she could see the surroundings. She spotted Josh and another person preparing to re-enter the village. But before she could call out to them, a group of locals dressed in full gear appeared. It seemed that the owners of the village had returned. Seeing this, Josh and his companion quickly ran into the forest. Eve and Levi, who were still in the village, were trapped and didn't know what to do. They calmed down, shook off the chasing crowd, and hid in a house. To their surprise, there were children sitting inside. Eve greeted them with a forced smile, but they sat silently without responding. The chasing crowd was heading their way, and Levi was ready to fight. Eve had an idea and hid them behind a shelf. It turned out to be a good move. The children did not betray them, and also actively helped cover them from the villagers' search. Eve was grateful and surprised that these children spoke English. This didn't seem like an indigenous tribe. The boy told Eve that they also fell from the green light in the sky. Eve then asked the boy how they could escape out of the village. The boy knew of a secret passage. Under his guidance, they avoided the searching crowd and approached the village wall. Scott and Lucas hadn't noticed the commotion in the village yet. They stumbled upon a house filled with strangely shaped weapons. They looked simple but were sharp enough. These were weapons from ancient times. If brought back to the modern world, they would be priceless antiques. While they were discussing how to transport them, a bald man stormed in to flex his bald head and restrained Lucas. Lucas didn't surrender and fought back, but his gun was knocked to the ground. Scott was shivering at the side, torn about whether to help or not. Soon, another villager entered, and Scott and Lucas were captured and thrown into the ritual building. They were somewhat desperate. The ropes were tied too tightly, and they thought they would soon end up like the corpse nearby. Lucas had an idea. He asked Scott to take out the lighter from his pocket. After burning the rope tied to their hands, they finally escaped. Josh and Riley, who were outside the village, also had a hard time. They were desperately running from a group of villagers. Eventually, they hid in a crevice, narrowly escaping capture. However, Josh didn't plan to return to the camp. He had to save his trapped mother from the village. Riley thought it was a suicide mission, but Josh had a plan that required Riley's cooperation. She hesitated, but finally agreed. Suddenly, music rang out not far from the village gate. The guards ran to check the source of the noise. It was coming from a mobile phone. Josh and Riley took advantage of the guards' absence and ran back into the village. As soon as they entered, they saw Scott and Lucas. They were also lucky to find Eve and Levi, who were preparing to cross the village wall with the help of the children. But then, a group of villagers discovered them. Without a word, they immediately drew their bows and arrows. Eve and Levi stood dumbfounded, not knowing what to do. At this moment, a high-ranking woman among the villagers appeared. She stopped the villagers from shooting and told Eve and the others to leave quickly. They escaped from the village in this baffling way and decided to return to the camp first. The survivors left at the camp were also panicking now. Lily told everyone that the murderer of the guy was an old man, but she didn't reveal any other details. This made everyone even more nervous. Ty could tell that the girl was hiding something, so he tried his best to get close to her. He found a baseball in an abandoned car and asked Lily to play with the other companions. After a game of baseball, Lily was indeed a lot better. Just then, Eve and the others finally returned to the camp. The survivors gathered around them. When they learned that Levi was sent by the authorities to rescue them, all the people got excited. But when they heard the news of the rescue plane's malfunction, their faces fell again. Ty was still concerned about Lily. He took the opportunity to find Lily again and asked her what else she was hiding. The girl finally revealed her secret. It turned out that Veronica was not Lily's real sister, but a human trafficker who had taken Lily away from her parents. At this moment, Veronica, who had just returned from finding food, saw the scene and guessed that her secret had been exposed. She immediately ran towards the forest. On the other side, Levi was trying to contact the base via radio. Despite the slim chances, he never gave up. Eve, filled with guilt towards her husband Gavin, moved slowly towards him, hoping to make amends. Unbeknownst to her, her husband outside had let go of his resentment and was focused on rescuing her. No one could imagine that the tattered letter in Gavin's hand was from 10,000 BC, written by his wife. Gavin sought ways to rescue Eve and met Sophia and Rebecca. Being a former military pilot, he was the perfect candidate for the special aircraft designed to enter the Sinkhole. However, Rebecca's insistence that Gavin depart that night was odd. Gavin hesitated. The military had banned aircraft from entering the Sinkhole. He had to figure out a way to bypass the blockade. Sophia said she would go to the base and use her authority to turn off the radar. Gavin looked at her incredulously. This was a serious military crime. Sophia, of course, had compelling reasons. Her lover had entered a desert sinkhole 3 years earlier and never returned. At this point, Rebecca stated that she wanted to join Gavin into the sinkhole. Her best friend was part of the exploration team that entered it. However, despite waiting for a long time, Gavin and Rebecca received no news that Sophia had successfully shut down the radar, and calls to her went unanswered. Gavin insisted that he would not take off until the radar was confirmed shut down, otherwise they could be destroyed by artillery fire. Unexpectedly, Rebecca told Gavin that they must depart today, otherwise he would never see his wife again. This made Gavin even more puzzled. Rebecca no longer hid anything. She took Gavin and his daughter to a construction site where excavators and workers were digging. She revealed that this was the site where the survivors who fell into the sinkhole settled in the ancient world. Gavin was curious about how they found the place. Instead of answering him, Rebecca took out a restored letter from an old glass bottle. It was unearthed from the site during the day. The letter was signed by Gavin's wife, Eve. The letter explained that since Gavin had found her lost ring in the ancient world, he would surely find the letter in the bottle. Moreover, Eve expressed deep apologies to Gavin, asking him to stop trying to find her. All his efforts would be in vain. On the 5th night after Eve fell into the sinkhole, the space-time tunnel in the sky shrunk suddenly and could close at any moment. Gavin realized that was tonight, which was why Rebecca insisted on leaving tonight. This made Gavin anxious, wishing they could depart immediately. His daughter expressed her support for his decision. Since the incident, Eve had traveled back to 10,000 BC and wrote a letter and buried it in the ground, intending to inform her husband in the modern world that the space-time portal linking to the future world was shrinking and it might close soon. Although she did not know whether her husband could receive it, this was the only effort she could make. On Scott's side, he compared the shrinking speed of the space-time portal and finally figured out the space-time portal would disappear within 24 hours. Levi persistently tried to contact the outside world via radio. Despite the slim chances, he never gave up. His efforts paid off, and the walkie-talkie finally got a response. All the survivors excitedly gathered around. The person on the other end was Diana, a survivor who had fallen into the desert sinkhole last time. She happened to be a mechanical engineer. Upon learning that she might be able to repair the plane, Levi decided to join her. But Diana was far from here. If they walked there, the space-time portal would probably have disappeared. Luckily, Ty said that he had just repaired a Jeep. Levi and Eve drove the Jeep to the location described by Diana, and finally arrived at a wasteland with man-made tents. They should have reached their destination. Sure enough, Diana appeared with a gun in hand after a short while. She had been living here for 3 years and had to be cautious. Levi took out a photo showing that Diana was a member of the exploration team in the photo and one of those Levi came to rescue. When she learned that the problem with Levi's plane was just a compressor failure, she became delighted because the plane she crashed had a perfect compressor. Eve and the others drove the Jeep back to the camp. When the survivors heard that the plane might be repaired, they were all delighted. Diana told everyone that the last time the space-time portal shrank to disappearance, it took only 24 hours. Now there wasn't much time left, they needed to prepare quickly. Then she and Levi drove towards the location of the plane, leaving Eve behind with more important matters. The plane could only carry 6 people at a time. With so many people, they needed to determine the order of departure. For fairness, Eve let everyone draw lots. The first group to leave was determined, which includes Josh and Lucas. The repair process of Levi and Diana went well. Diana, who had been trapped for 3 years, was about to leave, but suddenly became sentimental. It turns out Diana was Sophia's old flame, the person in charge of the rescue. Her other teammates had long been scattered. Only Sophia was her only spiritual support. Diana's greatest wish was to return to her side. As they were talking, the plane started successfully. Through the walkie-talkie, the survivors at the camp cheered up for this good news. Just then, everyone noticed something falling from within the space-time portal. They stared at the sky and couldn't help but rush to the crash site to investigate. It turned out that the object that had fallen was a drone. Levi followed the instructions to press the button, and the screen embedded in the body of the drone lit up. It was a message from Gavin. He had received Eve's letter, knowing that the space-time portal was about to close. But the content that followed was hard to accept. Gavin told them it was not going to work with Levi's plane. He had found a plane, and he would come to rescue them. It turned out that after seeing his wife's letter at the campsite and knowing the urgency of the situation, he was preparing to return to the farm to fly the plane when the national security agents arrived. From Sophia, they learned of Gavin's plan to fly a plane into the sinkhole and decided to prevent him. Gavin refused, as this was his only chance to rescue his wife. At this moment, a miner came over to report an important discovery. Several people went to check, and to their surprise, the group had dug out a plane wreckage from the ground. Through radar detection, they found a few human skeletons inside. Gavin recognized it as the aircraft that had been sent into the sinkhole to rescue people, and concluded that the pilot must have tried to fly people out, but failed. This made him anxious, not knowing whether his wife was inside. He wanted to go down and rescue people immediately, but the agent would not let him, worrying that going down there might trigger a strong earthquake. So they detained Gavin and locked him up. Sophia appeared. Gavin was dissatisfied with her betrayal, but Sophia had her own difficulties. If she didn't speak out, she might lose her job, and Rebecca's aircraft would be confiscated by the authorities. Upon hearing this, Gavin stopped arguing. There were more important things to do at the moment, like having Sophia send a drone into the sinkhole to inform Levi, Eve, and the others not to fly out on their own, or they would crash. After reading Gavin's message, Eve believed her husband. She called on everyone to wait a little longer, as Gavin would surely come to rescue them with the plane. But the survivors couldn't wait any longer, worried that if they continued to delay, the space-time portal would disappear. Levi said that he believed what Gavin said, but he didn't want to give up the plan to leave on his own. He decided to thoroughly inspect the plane with Diana. If it was going to crash, there must be a problem somewhere. Everyone agreed with this proposal. Eve couldn't stop them. Even her own son, Josh, didn't listen to her and insisted on leaving first. Eve knew there was a strong possibility that Josh was heading towards his death, so she sought out Officer Mary, asking her to join her in preventing Levi's plane from taking off. Mary, thinking of her own son, Lucas, who was also on the first departure list, was persuaded by Eve. So together, they drove to where the plane was parked. At that time, Diana and Levi discovered a faulty sensor on the plane, which could potentially be the reason the plane would crash. Just when they were preparing to repair it, Eve and Mary rushed over to stop them, declaring that the escape plan was canceled. However, Levi was determined to fly to the camp to pick up people. At this point, Officer Mary pulled out her gun, stating that if Levi wanted to die, he could, but he shouldn't drag her son down with him. But Diana drew her gun and confronted Mary. This might be their last chance to return home. Diana grew agitated. In a surprising turn of events, she pulled the trigger, and Diana was shot and fell to the ground. The plane was also hit in the fuel tank. They quickly drove Diana back to the camp. Despite the best efforts of Sam, he wasn't able to save Diana's life. Now the plane was damaged. Their hope of escape was shattered. Eve still hoped that her husband Gavin would come to rescue her. At this time, with Sophia's help, Gavin escaped back to the ranch again. The authorities wouldn't let him go, so he was prepared to fight. Gavin stood in front of the aircraft, urging everyone to start it quickly. He wanted to fly into the sinkhole to rescue his wife. If they were any slower, it would be too late. The startup time was still 5 minutes. However, the Homeland Security agents had already arrived. Gavin's daughter and Sophia managed to delay the agents until Gavin successfully took off in the aircraft. But the agents were not that easily fooled. Gavin soon received a communication from the bearded agent telling him to return to base immediately or they would shoot him down. Gavin thought it was just a threat and continued forward regardless, but he soon discovered 2 fighters approaching him, and the radar showed that the aircraft had been locked onto by missiles. It seemed like the agent was serious. Gavin had reached the sinkhole. He was prepared to dodge the missiles, but Rebecca stopped him, saying that he shouldn't sacrifice himself so recklessly. He should stay and look for other ways to save them. The desert sinkhole had more secrets that needed him to explore. After that, Rebecca jumped out of the plane with a parachute, planning to enter the sinkhole herself. Gavin wanted to continue forward in the plane, but he heard his daughter's voice over the communicator. She was in the command center, persuading Gavin not to do anything foolish. She had already lost her mother and brother, and she couldn't lose her father, too. Gavin was finally persuaded and promised the agent that he would land immediately. Thus, his rescue mission failed again. Before being locked up, Gavin learned from the agent that the plane wreckage that was excavated from the campsite had disappeared, indicating that his wife Eve had received the drone message and successfully prevented the plane crash. This made Gavin feel much better. At night, the survivors stared at the sky, slowly losing their hope of escape. It's about time they seriously considered how to survive in this prehistoric space. Eve was put under a difficult situation. Everyone is bound to blame her for their inability to return home. No one would think that her husband is the only hope for escape. Eve is now filled with guilt and hopes to do something to make amends. As a result, she dug a grave for the deceased Diana through the night. However, the resentment in people's hearts will not be easily dissipated. Even her son Josh has broken with her. At Diana's funeral, it seemed that the survivors intentionally isolated Eve and her accomplice Mary. At this time, Sam approached them because everyone was worried about the gun in Mary's hand and asked her to hand it over. Officer Mary couldn't help but laugh. In such a dangerous place, a gun is life. Surprisingly, her son Lucas stood up and added fuel to the fire, saying that this was not the first time Mary had killed someone. Mary wanted to continue arguing, saying that if she hadn't stopped them, everyone on the plane would have died. But everyone couldn't understand what she was saying about something that hadn't happened. Lucas even demanded that the 2 of them leave the camp. Sam tried to mediate, asking how taking the gun turned into expelling people. Because of such disagreements, everyone decided to vote. The majority wanted Eve and Mary to leave. Even their son Josh and Lucas voted in favor. This deeply hurt the 2 mothers, who had done everything to prevent their children from being harmed. Meanwhile, Ty woke up from his unconscious state, his hands and feet tied and unable to move. The previous day, he had set out alone to find Veronica, who had run away. He had intended to persuade her to return, but Veronica had been exposed for kidnapping Lily and was now feeling somewhat guilty. She chose to flee in the end, knocking out well-intentioned Ty. When he woke up, he happened to see someone passing by and cried for help. Unexpectedly, the tribal woman named Para menacingly drew a knife. She was the tribe leader who had previously pleaded for Eve and others, giving a few of them a chance to live. Para untied Ty's hands and stinky feet and took him to a cave to bandage his wounds. Seeing that he was no longer in great danger, she prepared to leave. But dark clouds suddenly filled the outside. She turned back without hesitation. As a native of the prehistoric continent, she knew the horrors of the climate here. But these survivors who had traveled through time might not have such an understanding. At this time, Eve was still packing her bags, preparing to leave. Levi came to persuade her, but to no avail. However, when she was about to leave, Eve couldn't help but ask Levi to take care of Josh. Truly, parental love knows no bounds, but Josh might not appreciate it. He was casually gathering firewood at this moment. However, Scott quickly realized something was wrong. The weather in 10,000 BC was much worse, and winter storms were much faster. Even the prehistoric giant birds in the sky were fleeing in all directions, seeming to foreshadow something bad about to happen. Mary stormed into the cement shed and scolded her shitty son for being against her. But suddenly, a telephone pole was swaying in the violent wind. She rushed towards her son without regard for her safety. As a result, mother and son were both crushed under the rubble. Fortunately, the collapsed area formed an isolated space, and the two of them were not seriously injured. Upon seeing the outside, Eve called everyone to try and help dig Mary and Lucas out from under the rubble. However, moving the large chunks of cement by hand was impossible. Ty suggested that he'd seen a large truck about 2 miles away. Perhaps there were some tools in it that could help. Upon hearing this, Josh offered to drive to check it out. Levi decided to go with him. Although Eve was somewhat worried watching her son drive away, she didn't stop him. As the wind grew stronger, many people ran to take cover. Only Eve and Levi remained, preparing to dig a tunnel from below to save Mary and her son. Seeing the trees knocked down by the wind, Levi couldn't help but feel worried. He advised Eve to take cover as well. After all, they didn't even know if the people buried inside were still alive. But Eve was stubborn, unmoved by Levi's pleas. Fortunately, their persistence paid off when they faintly heard calls for help from under the debris. It turned out that Mary had accidentally found a crevice. Seeing the light, her hope was restored. However, as time passed, there was still no movement from above. This frightened Lucas, who was shivering with fear and wetting his pants. Mary managed to calm him down. Meanwhile, Eve and the others outside were helpless. The wind was growing stronger. Even large rocks were being moved by its force. There was clearly no time to dig a tunnel. They had to think of another plan. Fortunately, the veteran Sam had an idea. He prepared to make a simple explosive to blast a hole in the rubble. Levi happened to have some bullets and took out the gunpowder to put into a bottle. Faced with the possibility of death, Mary decided to reveal her biggest secret to her son. He had always believed that Mary had killed his father, which was the source of his resentment towards her. As it turned out, his father had been a drug dealer. When his crimes were about to be exposed, he planned to turn his son into the police to take the blame. It was for this reason that Mary was forced to take matters into her own hands. Initially, she thought revealing this would cause more harm to her son, so she kept it a secret. Outside, Sam had already prepared the explosive. He told Mary and her son to move away as far as possible. As soon as the electric wire was exposed, the explosion sounded, and a hole was indeed blown in the cement slab. Mary and Lucas were finally rescued. As the storm subsided, Josh and Levi, who had gone to find tools, drove back. They also brought back a pile of warm clothes. When they found the truck, they realized it wasn't a construction vehicle, but a clothing delivery truck. They were somewhat speechless. It was too late to go back now because the wind was still raging outside. They had to take shelter in the truck. Riley told Josh that although his mother's actions seemed a bit selfish, she was obviously a good mother, and Josh shouldn't treat her like this. Josh felt she was right and accepted her advice. Their relationship began to heat up rapidly. Fortunately, Riley applied the brakes in time. She noticed that the sound of the storm outside had disappeared. It was time to leave. When Josh returned to the camp and heard that his mother had rescued Mary and Lucas, he finally forgave her. He even took the initiative to ask Eve not to leave. This time, everyone voted again, and the results were completely opposite to the previous vote. Everyone agreed that Eve should stay. Mary, who also reconciled with her son, surrendered her gun at his persuasion. She knew what was most important in her heart. At this point, the indigenous people in the cave were having a chat with Ty. Unexpectedly, over the years, they had come across several groups of time travelers, learning English and many life skills from them. However, the time travelers eventually showed extreme selfishness and possessiveness, so the natives have now become unfriendly towards these outsiders, but Tai managed to increase Para's fondness for him after a night's chat. However, she couldn't provide any help because they knew very little about the green light in the sky. In the real world, Gavin's attempt to enter the sinkhole was unsuccessful. After being caught by the Homeland Security, the bearded agent didn't make things difficult for him. He just had him sign a confidentiality agreement, promising not to tell anyone about the sinkhole, and then let him go. On returning home, Gavin did not plan to give up on his wife. Coincidentally, Sophia visited late at night to ask if Rebecca, who was leaving after the parachute jump, had left any instructions. Gavin told her that Rebecca had only left a date, November 16, 1988. Gavin suddenly remembered that this date was close to the date he was adopted. Could the sinkhole be related to his origins? Gavin didn't actually know who his biological parents were. His adoptive parents said that he was found at the door of an orphanage when he was a child. As the rescue commander, Sophia could look into Gavin's origins. Surprisingly, she soon found decades-old files the very next day. Back then, Gavin was sent to the orphanage by a church, so the two immediately went to the church and found the old lady who had sent him to the orphanage. However, she knew nothing about Gavin's origins, only that she had seen a young Gavin wandering on the streets, so she had sent him to the orphanage. But the old lady revealed that there was a girl with her at the time. Strangely, Gavin was already 12 years old at the time, but he had no recollection of this event. Later, with Sophia's help, Gavin found the girl who had wandered with him. When they arrived at the girl's residence, no one was home, but a giant handprint caught Gavin's attention because he had seen it in his visions. He concluded that the girl must be related to the sinkhole. The survivors had just survived a storm. Although there were no casualties, the resources they had gathered were destroyed. Now, their most urgent problem was finding food. Scott prepared to build a greenhouse to grow vegetables, but these city dwellers didn't possess such skills. Suddenly, cries for help came from afar. It turned out that Lily had seen someone lurking in the woods and worried if it was Veronica coming to find her. Sam asked everyone to split up and investigate. Eve paired up with Levi, possibly because he smelled better than others. They spotted a fleeing figure. Upon closer inspection, it was the young boy, Isaiah, from the primitive village who had once helped Eve and Levi escape. He had fallen during his escape and cut his palm. After Eve and the others bandaged him, they asked why he was there. Scared, Isaiah remained silent throughout. Levi thought that the boy was spying. After all, a companion from their camp was killed by an old man who turned out to be the boy's grandfather. Tai had once been saved by the tribe leader Para, who had clarified that her tribe had never killed any of the survivors. Regardless of the boy's intentions, now that he was injured and the woods were dangerous, they could send him back to the village as a gesture of goodwill and ask the villagers to teach them some farming skills. Then, they would all have something to eat. So they set off on this diplomatic mission. Eve, Levi, and Tai went together. Isaiah, who was riding in a vehicle for the first time, was excited. Finally, he revealed that he was not there to spy, but was merely curious about Eve and her group of strangers. He had come a few times before and knew that Eve and the others were not bad people. That's why he had helped them escape the village when they were trapped. When they approached the village, they were quickly surrounded by the indigenous inhabitants and then escorted into the village. Initially, the villagers were unfriendly towards Eve and the others. Thankfully, they had specifically brought Isaiah back home, and Tai was acquainted with the tribe leader, so they requested the tribe to teach them survival skills. Isaiah's grandfather reminded Para not to trust these outsiders. However, Para hesitated for a while and finally agreed to Tai and the others' request. She decided to show them how humans survived 10,000 years ago. Unbelievably, they were already able to grow a variety of vegetables and even knew how to use the principle of levers for irrigation. The food on the table was abundant, with all sorts of fruits and vegetables. Eve was astonished and asked if they could pack some food to take back, as there were many hungry people in the survivors' camp. Para agreed without hesitation. However, Levi did not feel the village's goodwill. He always believed that his companion's death was their doing, so he asked Para why she was so eager to help the survivors. Para answered, "There were several other villages around here and they competed with each other, so she was doing this to make friends, not enemies." But Levi was still suspicious and decided to investigate on his own. For some reason, Eve felt an affection for Isaiah. The boy also opened up to Eve. It turned out that he had been orphaned since childhood, and he and his grandfather were not original residents of the village. They joined only a few years ago. As for where they came from, the boy didn't know. At this time, Levi ran over with a new discovery. He found the wallet of the victim in Isaiah's grandfather's room, which might prove that he was the murderer. Thus, Eve and Levi went to confront Para. At the time, Lily also saw Isaiah's grandfather at the scene of the incident. The old man didn't deny this, but when he found the deceased, he was already dead. He brought back the wallet just to figure out where these people came from. Levi clearly couldn't accept these excuses, but Para firmly stated that she believed Isaiah's grandfather wasn't lying because someone else was the murderer. Not long ago, one of her own tribe members was also killed by the same method of electrocution. Para was heartbroken at this time. She had welcomed Eve and the others with open arms, but in return, she received suspicion, so she ordered her men to expel them. Just then, the sound of a horn echoed through the air, indicating an emergency. It turned out that Isaiah had been kidnapped. Eve immediately offered to help with the search. She teamed up with Levi, and not too far away, they found a stone toy that Isaiah used to play with. This discovery invigorated them, and they immediately followed the trail. However, Isaiah's grandfather was one step ahead of them and had found the person who had taken Isaiah. Unexpectedly, it was Rebecca, who had previously parachuted into a sinkhole and was now appearing here. Surprisingly, she and Isaiah's grandfather had known each other for a long time. She insisted that Isaiah was important and that she had to take the boy away. But his grandfather refused and pulled out a dagger. By the time Eve and Levi arrived, all they saw was Rebecca lying on the ground with a knife wound, mumbling about needing to find Isaiah. The group quickly took her back to the village for treatment. Levi recognized Rebecca as one of the people in the group photo. When Rebecca woke up, she asked to speak with Eve alone. Eve was somewhat puzzled, but still went in. Rebecca told her that Isaiah was special and needed to complete an important task. However, his grandfather wanted to stop him. Eve was confused about why Rebecca was sharing this information with her. Meanwhile, the folks who were left at the camp weren't idle. These survivors, new to the ancient continent, were constantly in awe of their surroundings. Sam asked everyone to pair up and patrol the nearby areas, but one man and woman had just had a romantic spark, and they were not in the mood for patrolling. Seizing the moment when no one was around, they started getting high and dry. They didn't notice that Lily was grabbed by a figure. It turned out to be Veronica. She had found a suitable cave to live in outside and wanted to take Lily away. But Lily did not want to leave. During their argument, Sam and Mary, who were patrolling nearby, rushed over. Veronica was not only a human trafficker, but she had also injured Ty before. Sam decided to handcuff her and lock her in a small car. Soon, the other patrol squads returned and also saw Veronica locked in the car. She was emotional and seemed on the verge of a breakdown. Riley ran back to persuade her father that such harsh law enforcement was wrong. Unexpectedly, the always rational father was stubborn this time, insisting that he was protecting everyone's safety. Just then, Josh ran over to tell everyone that something was wrong with Veronica, so several people ran over immediately. They saw her whole body start to convulse. Mary quickly helped her unlock the handcuffs. Sam recognized this was caused by her anxiety. Before long, Veronica actually stopped breathing, but Sam's timely rescue saved her life. Sam hadn't expected to nearly cause a fatality and was drenched in a cold sweat. Riley had long noticed that something was wrong with her father. She didn't understand why her rational father would change like this. Under her constant questioning, Sam finally revealed that after returning from the battlefield, he had been diagnosed with severe post-traumatic stress disorder and usually relied on medication to control his condition. His pill bottle had run out the day before, so now he was prone to bouts of mania and impulsivity. On the other side, Gavin, although unable to fly directly into the sinkhole to rescue his wife, found another clue. His origin might be somehow related to the sinkhole. Along with him when he was abandoned was a girl named Ella. Gavin and Sophia visited Ella's house, but they didn't find her. Instead, they discovered a palm symbol, which was unique to the sinkhole. After much effort, Sophia managed to arrange a meeting with Ella's assistant. The assistant revealed that Ella was a fervent artist, and the handprint sculpture was her most recent work. However, Ella suddenly became strange, and she didn't want to see anyone. As Gavin and Sophia were preparing to leave, Gavin saw a woman in a car watching him. He felt she was Ella and wanted to greet her, but she panicked and ran away. Although Gavin and Sophia didn't catch up with her, they remembered the car's license plate. Sophia asked some friends for help and finally traced the car's owner to a canyon where she lived. Back to the ancient timeline, Isaiah, under his grandfather's guidance, was preparing to leave the village. But the little boy was full of doubts and didn't understand why his grandfather was doing this. His grandfather didn't explain and simply looked at the boy's injured arm. Gavin, Sophia, and the others came to Ella's residence. There was no one there, but Gavin felt an eerie familiarity, though he couldn't recall all why. Then, Gavin arrived at a pit, and his sense of familiarity grew stronger. Then, an illusion appeared. He saw Isaiah's grandfather from Isaiah's perspective and noticed the scar on the arm. Gavin had a similar scar and was convinced that he originated from the ancient times within the Sinkhole. Meanwhile, Rebecca told Eve that the little boy, Isaiah, was actually her husband, Gavin. Eve was shocked by the revelation, unable to accept it at all. However, the bedridden Rebecca kept insisting that they must find Isaiah and take him to the highest peak. Suddenly, she began coughing up blood. Eve quickly ran outside for help. To treat the injured Rebecca, they needed to call on the camp's dedicated doctor, Sam. Levi quickly brought Sam over. Along with Sam came Eve's son, Josh, who had a right to know about his father. As Sam rushed to treat Rebecca, Eve finally calmed down and told Josh that the little boy was Gavin. Josh did not believe her and thought it was absurd. Eve herself did not believe it either, but she did feel a natural familiarity with the little boy Isaiah. At this time, they were informed that Rebecca's treatment was successful and she was no longer in danger. Eve and her son ran in, their minds filled with questions. Rebecca told Eve that Gavin was born in the ancient world. When he was a child, he traveled through a time tunnel at the top of the highest peak and arrived in 1988. The time tunnel was still open and Eve must send Isaiah through. Josh did not understand why they had to do this. Rebecca said the time tunnel would close tomorrow. If Isaiah did not travel through it, he would not meet Eve in the future, and their children, Josh and his sister, would disappear in this world. Now Eve had no choice but to believe. She couldn't gamble with her children's lives. The urgent task was to find Isaiah. They decided to split up and search. Levi, Eve, and Josh drove together and found a rising smoke in the distance. They went to check and found a recently extinguished fire in a cave and a backpack nearby. Eve recognized it as Isaiah's grandfather's. They must still be nearby. Then, Levi found 2 rows of footprints at the mouth of the cave, which was the path up the mountain, but they couldn't get there by car. Levi decided to go on foot with Eve, while Josh would drive to the foot of the opposite mountain alone. Halfway up the mountain, Josh made a new discovery. At the moment, Isaiah was walking alone in the forest when suddenly a tiger appeared to flex its teeth. He was frightened and backed away. At the critical moment, Josh in the car suddenly sped up and knocked the tiger over. He didn't expect to find Isaiah here. It turned out Isaiah was with his grandfather, but after seeing his grandfather hurt someone, he was strongly repulsed. So taking advantage of his grandfather's absence to search for food outside, he secretly escaped and planned to return to the village. Soon after, Eve and Levi also arrived. When they opened Isaiah's bandage, they found that his wound was exactly the same as Gavin's scar. Now, Eve and her son had to believe. However, Isaiah didn't know about these things. He still wanted to return to the village, but Eve decided to take him directly to the peak to complete the mission, unaware that Isaiah's grandfather was hiding not far away. On the way, Eve felt that she should not hide anything from Isaiah, so she told him about his upcoming journey through time. Isaiah was very resistant. At this moment, his grandfather chased after them from afar. Fortunately, Eve and the others discovered in time and sped up towards their destination. However, the group was quickly blocked by a massive ravine. Isaiah knew of a bridge not far away. Sam thought Isaiah's grandfather would surely know about it too, and they couldn't risk passing that way. Eve believed they just needed to get there before them. They quickly arrived at the bridge. Eve and Isaiah crossed first. When Josh and Levi prepared to cross, Isaiah's grandfather suddenly appeared with a group of armed men. Levi and Josh had no choice but to surrender. The old man stated that if they released Isaiah, he wouldn't harm the two. Levi immediately drew a dagger and cut the bridge. However, the old man didn't give up easily. He told Eve to head 4 miles east to the end of the ravine and have Isaiah cross over. Otherwise, she wouldn't see Josh and Levi again. Eve had no better plan and could only walk and observe. The innocent Isaiah was confident that he could persuade his grandfather to release the men. But Eve was in a dilemma. If Isaiah didn't go to the time tunnel, her son Josh would die. If he went through, his grandfather would kill Josh. At this time, Para and Ty arrived. Eve explained the current predicament. Ty thought they needed more manpower to rescue Josh and Levi. Para regretfully stated that his people couldn't help because Isaiah's grandfather had good relationships. Ty decided the only solution was to go back to the survivors' camp for help. Eve had no better plan and could only wait in place with Isaiah. Sam and his daughter stayed in the village, responsible for taking care of the injured Rebecca. Rebecca's condition had improved significantly. She took out a notebook and, bearing her pain, expressed her desire to return to the camp because she had important things to do. Sam saw her anxious look and didn't refuse. They quickly returned to the camp. Sam introduced Rebecca's identity to everyone and announced the existence of the time time tunnel at the peak. It could be crossed without the need of an aircraft. Unfortunately, it would lead to 1988. It was up to those who had time traveled from 21 years in the future to decide what to do. Most survivors accustomed to modern life didn't want to return to 1988. They preferred to wait for perhaps a better opportunity. However, Scott had another reason for staying. He recently found an ancient cow with a QR code etched on it. He saw the cow passing by when he was taking a break in the jungle. This was undoubtedly a huge discovery. Scott thought that if they had it, they could drink milk, which was a luxury in these resource-scarce ancient times. He wanted to gather companions to bring the cow back, but everyone thought he was joking and ignored him. The only one who agreed to go with him was Veronica. Her identity as a trafficker had been exposed, and she was now severely ostracized. She desired to do something useful for everyone in order to regain their approval. Veronica grew up on a farm and knew a lot about the habits of cows. Under her guidance, they finally found the cow. When they led the cow back to the camp, everyone was happy, and Veronica seemed to have regained some confidence. However, when she learned there was a chance to return to 1988, she chose to go. Her previous life was a mess, and she wanted a fresh start. At this moment, Rebecca found Lily alone, tearing a page from her notebook and handing it to her, indicating there was something important to do. Whatever Rebecca said next, Lily was adamant that she wanted to pass through the time-space tunnel. In the real world, Gavin also deduced from the visions that he came from the sinkhole. He had just recovered from the shock when the long-missing Ella finally appeared. She had lost her memories of childhood and didn't remember coming from the sinkhole. Everything Gavin said was too absurd, and Ella couldn't accept it for a moment. Gavin kept asking about the handprint Ella had made and where the sculpture came from. Ella replied that she had been seeing visions frequently in the past week, and the sculpture was made according to the content of the visions. Gavin immediately responded that he could also see the visions, but Ella still couldn't accept this explanation and ordered Gavin and the others to leave. On the way back, his daughter mentioned Gavin finding her mother's wedding ring, which made her believe her mother had time-traveled back to prehistoric times. This gave Gavin an idea. He could also find some proof to convince Ella. They immediately thought of the ancient habitat they were excavating. They quickly arrived at the excavation site. His daughter and Sophia kept watch at the entrance while Gavin sneaked in. Fortunately, it was a shutdown period, and there weren't many people inside. Gavin found a dragonfly fossil, which Ella had seen in her visions and drawn. Just as Gavin was about to take it away, he received a text that someone was coming. Gavin hid behind a shelf, and just as a security guard was about to discover him, Gavin messaged Sophia to cut the power. Finally, the guard walked away at the last moment. Gavin obtained the fossil and escaped. They didn't dare to delay and returned to Ella's residence, presenting her with the dragonfly fossil. When Ella learned it came from ancient times, she seemed to be stimulated and instantly regained her childhood memories. It turns out Ella is the little girl Lily. Moreover, the clothes she wore when she was adopted were still preserved, and there was a piece of paper in the pocket, which must have been left by Rebecca. They took a closer look and found it marked the location and appearance dates of all the sinkholes. The desert sinkhole and Brea sinkhole had already appeared. According to the paper, tomorrow would be the day the Seattle sinkhole appears. Back in the prehistoric era, Eve saw it was about to get dark and knew that time waits for no one. So she told Isaiah to wait there and meet with Ty to go to the time-space portal when he arrived with the backups, while Eve herself prepared to venture alone to the designated location to rescue her kidnapped son. Upon arrival, Eve sees Josh and Levi tied up by a few guards, unable to move. She boldly steps out and tells the old man that Isaiah must travel back to the modern world. Otherwise, Josh will still die. However, the old man doesn't care about this. He only wants Isaiah not to leave him. So he orders his men to tie up Eve. The guards, though, fail to notice that Eve holds a sharp stone in her hand. Meanwhile, the survivors in the camp are discussing whether to travel back to 1988. They are curious why Rebecca is so invested. It turns out she and Isaiah's grandfather are experts studying the sinkholes. The previous Brea sinkhole was a result of their operational error. Just then, Ty hurries back to the camp, stating that Eve is in danger and needs everyone's help. Everyone decides to go for the rescue. However, before this, Lily and Veronica have already set off, ready to head to the peak time-space portal. This is because Lily promised Rebecca's request to deliver the sinkhole map to Isaiah. After completing the task, Rebecca will help Lily return to her family. During their conversation, Veronica fell into a trap, and Lily, despite her best efforts, can't open it. On the other side, Isaiah, not heeding Eve's advice to wait, secretly follows her and is quickly caught by the guards. Fortunately, Sam appears in time and breaks the guard's chick neck. It turns out that Ty brought the reinforcements from the camp. The group quickly decides to let Mary and the two take Isaiah to the time-space portal, while Sam and the others rescue Eve and Josh. At this time, Eve is still desperately cutting the rope. Suddenly, a stone distracts a guard's attention. Sam, hiding on the side, instantly tackles him. Eve also manages to untie the rope and takes down a guard. Then the group works together and quickly eliminates all the guards. However, Isaiah's grandfather takes the chance to flee for his shitty life during the chaos. Everyone wants to chase after him, but Josh suddenly collapses in pain. Eve realizes it might be because the time-space portal is about to disappear, affecting Josh's life. His sister in the real world also feels a threat to her life. Their father, Gavin, decides they must rush to the upcoming Seattle sinkhole. This might be their only chance to save them. Eve, trapped in the sinkhole, is in a state of great urgency. She must rush to the time-space portal as quickly as possible. At this point, the tribe leader, Para, announces that she knows a shortcut to the portal. Everyone immediately sets off, ready to intercept Isaiah first. Isaiah is on his way to the time-space portal when a guard suddenly blocks his path. Mary quickly pulled the trigger at the charging guard. Unexpectedly, the guard is still fierce even after being shot. Eve and the others arrive just in time, killing the guard without mercy. However, Mary's abdomen has been punctured. Sam helps her bandage the wound, but soon realizes it's internal bleeding. Mary struggles even to walk, so she asks Eve and the others to go to the time-space portal without her. Seeing this, Lucas volunteers to stay behind to take care of his mother. Eve, Levi, and the rest of the group have to set off towards the time-space portal. The shortcut Paula mentioned is actually a tunnel that can cross the valley portal. However, getting through the tunnel is not easy. The exit of the tunnel is directly above a deep pool filled with tar. Falling into it means certain death. The only way out is to climb up a rudimentary rope ladder. Josh volunteers to go first and successfully reaches the hole. Then it's Isaiah's turn. But when it's Eve's turn, the rope anchor above suddenly comes loose. Thanks to Josh pulling his mother in time, she narrowly escapes danger. However, the ladder is damaged, and Sam and Levi can no longer continue. They let Eve go first, planning to take a detour and meet up with them. At the same time, Mary and Lucas are slowly moving forward. Her wound is still bleeding and she can't hold on and falls down. Lucas wants to take his mother to the time-space portal, believing that the medical conditions in 1988 can definitely heal her wound. But she is getting weaker. She keeps urging her son to be a good person. After he promises, this tough mother closes her eyes forever. Lucas can't help but cry out in pain. In the end, only Eve, her son, and Isaiah are about to reach their destination. At this point, Josh has become incredibly weak. Eve decides to take Isaiah and leave first. Unexpectedly, Isaiah's grandfather suddenly appears to flex his dying body, pushing Eve down and preparing to take Isaiah away. But Eve picks up a stick and knocks him down. As they are at a standoff, Ty and Para appear with guns, allowing Eve and the others to escape. The old man, realizing that he will lose his grandson forever, collapses. Para urges Ty to hurry back to 1988, where his terminal illness could be treated. But Ty decides to stay. He would rather spend the rest of his life with Para than die painfully in 1988. Before heading to Seattle, Gavin and his team in the real world first located the bearded agent from Homeland Security. They urged him to evacuate all the residents around the imminent sinkhole to prevent a repeat of the La Brea tragedy. However, the agent believed that it was absurd to initiate an evacuation based solely on a hand-drawn map. Gavin persuaded him that risking it for the safety of thousands of lives was absolutely worth it. Finally, the agent heeded Gavin's suggestion and arranged for the guards to start evacuating the residents. Shortly after, Gavin's team also arrived at the scene. Ella, who is the grown-up Lily, suddenly saw a vision of Veronica trapped. This memory triggered her recall of that moment. Veronica, seeing that Lily was unable to free her despite her best efforts, urged her to leave at once. If they delayed any longer, the space-time portal would disappear. Lily tearfully promised that she would come back to rescue her once her mission was completed. Now that the Seattle sinkhole was about to appear, it was time to fulfill the promise. However, after the agent had completed the evacuation of the surrounding residents, Sophia discovered that the energy fluctuation was disappearing. This meant that the sinkhole's location had shifted. They took their detector and finally arrived at a location in the suburbs. Following the continuous loud noises, they quickly found a sinkhole, but this time it was much smaller. It was impossible for Gavin to fly a plane down into it. At this moment, Eve and Isaiah finally reached the space-time portal. It was shrinking continuously, as if it could disappear at any moment. The young boy, who had learned the truth about his origin on the way, bid Eve goodbye and resolutely walked into the space-time portal. At the same time, Eve's daughter in the real world felt her pain disappear, knowing that her mother had succeeded. However, when the agent asked them to leave, Gavin stated that this was his last chance to rescue his wife, and he would not miss it again. Not only did his daughter support Gavin, but she also wanted to go down together. So the father and daughter held hands and jumped into the sinkhole together, accompanied by Ella, who wanted to fulfill her promise to Veronica. At this time, the survivors also gathered at the peak. Seeing Josh unharmed, they all broke into happy smiles. Suddenly, they saw Lily, holding the map, rushing over. She claimed to be on an important mission, and then desperately ran towards the space-time portal. But by the time Lily arrived, the space-time portal was no longer passable. Josh and Riley wanted to comfort her, but suddenly the space-time portal began to shake and then fiercely expand in all directions. Lily, Josh, and Riley disappeared along with it. Eve and the others were all stunned by that, knowing what had happened. At this point, Scott, who remained at the camp, claimed that Rebecca had been keeping many things from everyone. She did not deny it, and, with a mysterious expression, led him to a place. Off in the distance, a majestic stone tower stood. Rebecca said she had built it, and Scott wore a look of anticipation on his face. The scene shifted to Gavin, his daughter, and Ella, who woke up on a beach. Suddenly, a giant mammoth passed in front of them, even amiably greeting everyone. Gavin was excited, realizing that they had successfully traveled through time, and they could now continue the missions in this ancient timeline. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.